Hello everyone, we're going to get started with Unity today. Click your Unity Hub and open that up. Next, we're going to go to New Project and go down and find First Person Core. Next, I'm just going to name this Unity Intro and then hit Create Project. Once your project is open, it should look something similar to this. You're going to see multiple different areas such as your scene area, your game area, your hierarchy, your project, and your inspector. I'm going to go over briefly what each of these do. Your scene area is where you can navigate through your scene and actually manipulate particular objects. This is usually used for moving objects. You can rotate them. You can move them around. You can also scale them. So green will scale it in that way, blue will scale it in this way, red in this way, and the gray will scale it dynamically. Or if you just want to think about it in a 2D perspective, depending on how you're looking at it, or you can do all the above. This object allows you to rotate, move, and scale all at the same time. Let's see. Next, let's take a look at this. Over here is your perspective. You can have different perspectives. And if you ever get locked into this perspective and you're not sure how to get out of it, you can right click with your mouse and just drag. And I'm just going to click that and go back. And all I did was click the middle gray button here. Get back to where I was. Alright, so next, the most important thing is your player. So this here is your first person controller. If you notice these white lines coming out, this is where the camera is for your player. So if you notice, it's actually in front of this capsule. So everything you see is going to be in front of this capsule, which is what is shown down here in the game view. The game view is basically just a representation of what's happening in real time. So if I was to find my player, let's say M, and move them. If you notice, in the game area, it's moving them at the same time. Another important thing to know how to do is actually how to play your scene. So up here, you're going to have play, pause, and step. We don't really use steps, so we're just going to use play and pause. So I'm going to play it. If you notice, that was maximized on play there. So I can press WASD to go in my different directions. I can use my mouse to look around, and I can use space to jump. Now if you notice here, we have a block in midair. That was the block that we were manipulating. If you notice, it is actually floating in space. Kind of cool, huh? Well, that's because there's no gravity put on that object, which we'll get into later. So, going on to this, we can jump up here. We can also run into walls and collide. Keep going. And we can jump off. So, to get out of this, we're going to press the exit key, because right now our mouse is not shown. So I press exit, that gives us our mouse. You can either press play to unplay it, or you can press pause, which will pause everything. So I just clicked pause, and I can click that again to go back, or play just to end it all. Next is the hierarchy. So the hierarchy is basically a representation of all your objects within the game. and it allows you to subcategorize those objects into hierarchies. So I'll give you a quick example. I'm going to come up here and create an object. I'll create a 3D object, and I will create a cube. Just going to drag that up here. And if you're wondering how I got close to that cube, all I did was double click this cube. So let's say I have a bunch of cubes. So I'm going to just quickly duplicate this. I'm going to press Control D. That duplicated that, and all I did was dragged it over. Control D. Control D. So instead of having a bunch of cubes in a game, what I could do instead is create an empty game object. And I'm just going to rename this All Cubes. So instead of trying to figure out where all my cubes are, I can put them all inside All Cubes. All I do is highlight them and drag and drop them into here. So now if I'm clicking on the top of the hierarchy, I can move them all at the same time. If I click in a subcategory, I can move one. And then back here, move them all over again. This also helps when you want to rotate them or do anything special. I highly recommend that you organize your hierarchy as much as possible with the correct names as you can, because this can get very cluttered very fast. Going back to this, let's take a look at some of the stuff you can create. So we went over creating an empty game object. That was create empty. Create empty child, create empty parent. That's pretty self-explanatory. 3D objects. You can create a cube, sphere, capsule, cylinder, plane, quad, text, ragdoll, train, tree, wind, 3D text, etc. Effects. You have the particle systems. If you're not familiar with what those are, I'm going to show you now. So a particle system is just that, particles. And I'll get into this a little bit later, but you can actually manipulate how big they are, how small they are, how many of them that they are, the colors. There's all kinds of things that you can change when it comes to particles. Other things you can create, trail. So basically, this creates a trail behind wherever it was. So if you wanted to create like a bullet or something and have a trail or have a car, if you notice, the end trail disappears as you go. Let's try creating something else. We have a directional light. Directional light is basically the sun. If you notice in the game area how the light is changing, that's because we've added another sun. I'm just going to delete that. Let's see, we also have the different types of lights. So that was directional light. And we have point light, spotlight, area light, reflection probes. You can experiment with those as you want. Audios, if you have any types of games in your sound, such as background music or any special effects like explosions, you can add audio sources to hear that sound. So in Unity, you need two different things. You need a listener and you need something to make a sound. If you've ever heard the question, if a tree falls in the middle of the woods and nobody's around to hear it, does it make a sound? Well, according to Unity, no, it doesn't make a sound because you can't hear it. So you need to have a listener and somebody talking or something audio playing. Video, UI, this allows you to create your own UI in the game. So if you wanted to find an image and put an image in a game, you would have a canvas and a sub for an image, and then you could drag and drop your images into here to display them. That's a bit further on, so I'm just going to delete that. Let's delete some of this other stuff. Now, I've been going down and clicking delete. You can also just click this and then hit delete on your keyboard and delete it that way. Alright, so I've pretty much explained the hierarchy and how that works. Next is your project. So this can be used to store codes, objects, written helpful pieces of documentation, 3D animations. It holds basically all the guts of your Unity project. You can explore going through there, but ultimately all this stuff is necessary pretty much for your game to run the way it's supposed to run. So I don't recommend going through and deleting stuff randomly through here unless you really know what you're doing. Next, we have the inspector. So right now, if you notice, it's not showing up anything. So let's click something. I'll click this cube. So when I click this cube, it shows me all the things that I can change for this object. So, I'm going to go over the most used things, not just everything. Tag, if you have a tag on your object, it can be used later on in coding to specify the different types of objects that you're working with. I can move this and you'll see the position X is changing. So it changes it in real time. I can also put my mouse over this X with those two arrows and then left click and drag. You also have rotation and you have scale. So this helps if you just wanted to have something uniform and go 5, 5, 5 and just have a ginormous cube in the middle of your game. And let's say you wanted to even out all the rotations. There. This helps if you wanted to rotate things by 90 degrees. Of course, you can't tell because it's all, square. Alright, so moving on, you also have the mesh. So the mesh is what you physically see of the object. And the mesh renderer basically says whether you can see the object. So let's say I wanted to make an invisible cube for myself to run into. What I could do is I could unclick the mesh renderer, and this basically becomes an invisible cube. I can still collide with it because it has a box collider, but I won't be able to see it. Next, down here is the actual texture for the object. So if you notice, it's this brown texture, so I'm just going to re-enable that. Alright, in case you're wondering how I've been able to move around. So what I'm doing right now is I am holding down my right mouse, and all I'm doing is pressing my WASD keys. When I press W, I go forward, S, I go back. Now, another cool thing is while I'm holding my right mouse and using my WASD keys to move around, I can also use Shift, and that allows me to go super fast. So if I'm holding Shift while I'm pressing WAS or D, and also my mouse, right mouse being held down, I can go super fast. A couple other helpful things that you'll need to know is how to manipulate stuff. So, I already showed you that you could do, while selecting an object, you could do Control D, and that allows you to duplicate that object. Also, if you press and hold down V, it allows you to select the actual points of an object. So I'm going to left click this and drag, and it will automatically connect it to this vertex here. So you can't see it down there because it's below the floor, but this is a good example. This automatically puts them side by side, no gaps. This helps if you wanted to build a building. So, If I duplicate that, press V. Now let's say I wanted to select more than one. I can left click, hold down Shift, left click, left click. If you notice, they're actually shown right here. And then I could move them all at the same time. Now it's also selecting the environment because I accidentally selected that, so let's unselect that. All I did was I pressed and held down Control to unselect that, which moved my arrows back over to this object. So then I can move specifically these. And just because I know where these are, I'm also going to show you another way to select them. I can select this, hold down Shift. Now that select everything in between here. That's not necessarily what I want. So I'm going to come back to here and press Control. And then left click these. It allows me to individually select those. Alright, that's everything you need to know to get yourself started on making projects. I'll come back with more videos soon. Thank you for your time.